start our topic, let us introduce first ourselves. So, my name is Sharon G. Calosa, 20 years old, from Babasit, Manaoag, Pangasinan. I am currently taking up Bachelor of Secondary Education, major of Science.
So, good afternoon, sir. My name is Juvie Mondiamagno, 20 years of age, from Parian, Manaoag, Pangasinan, and currently taking up Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in Science.
So, good afternoon, sir. My name is Benjamin Biogo, and I am 21 years old from Sapang, Manaoag, Pangasinan, and I am currently taking up the Bachelor of Secondary Education, major of Science.
Hi, my name is Mary Joy B. Bautista from Sagban, San Jacinto, Pangasinan. I'm 19 years old, currently taking up Bachelor of Secondary Education major in Mathematics. Thank you.
So, good afternoon again, classmates, sir. So, our subject in this afternoon is the teacher and the community, school culture, and organizational leadership. So, in this course, we are done already in the chapter 1 and chapter 2 in this course. So, now let's proceed to the chapter 3, which is entitled of Social Science Theories and Their Implication to Education. So, next slide, please. So, let us start to the social dimension of education, which is, next please, our learning objectives in this lesson. So, after studying this chapter, you should be able to, first objective, differentiate the various social science theories. Number 2, explain the relationship of the various social theories, the conflict, consensus, functionalism, and interactionalist theories and educational system. And the last one is discuss how the various social theories affect the functions of schools. So let's proceed. So introduction. So sociology sees education as one of the major institutions that constitutes society. So first, let's define first what is sociology. So sociologist is the person itself who is studying the concept of society. And we all know that sociology is study of society. So they see sociologists see education as one of the major institutions that constitutes society. Yes, it's true that education is major institution that constitutes society. Why? Because education can be found everywhere. Everywhere, wherever we go in different places or within our society, education is always there. So next is, while theorists guide research and policy formulation in the sociology of education, they also provide logical explanation for why things happen the way we do. The way they do, rather. So, theories is their guidelines for them for their research and formulation in terms of the sociology of education. Because sociologists, through that theories, help them to understand more the concept or the concept of educational system that we have. Next, please. So, introduction to the social dimension of education. So, next slide, please. So, Dahrendorf, 1959 to 1968, as cited by Richard 2000, is the major exponent of the position that society has the two phases, which is the conflict and consensus. These two has different meaning. So, they cannot be together because of their meaning itself. And the sociological theory, therefore, should be divided into two parts, which is the conflict theory and consensus theory. So let's proceed. So consensus and conflict theory. So here we have the comparison between consensus and conflict theory. So let us start first to the consensus theory. So first, consensus theory or consensus society see shared norms and values as fundamentals to society. Because these shared norms, which is they see it because norms and values is their basis to have a better society, or for them to have a peaceful society. Because norms, we all know that norms is a set of rules and guidelines that society that held society together, or hold society together. And then values, this is the one who in each of us have it, because we value many things that are very important to us. So yan. So norms and values is their basis in their society when in terms of consensus theory or consensus society. While in conflict theory, they emphasize the dominance of some social groups by others. So meaning from the word itself that dominance. When we say dominance, there is supremacy. So supremacy meaning there is an hierarchy, which is the upper class and the lower class. So in there, the upper class there is more powerful, or they have more supremacy than the lower class. Because that's why they put it in the conflict theory, which is from the word itself, it says all that we need to do, that we need to do about what is conflict is. So there is a discrimination, or yun nga, like what I said, the diversity of each individuals within this conflict society. So next is, let's go again in the consensus theory or consensus society. So examine value integration in society. In consensus society, they are studying or testing the value that will integrate to bring unity, or bring unity to the society where they are belong. So while in the conflict theory, they examine conflict of interest. So they study testing what is the conflict of interest. For example, the conflict of interest of one another. So for example, Juby and Bench have different interests to one another. And then if they going to share it to one another, of course, there is a possibility that they will be having a clash, or something that will be a tension between the two. So next is the conflict of interest, which is one example of conflict interest. And then another one is examining the coercion that holds the society together in the face of these stresses. So coercion, meaning they are something, there is someone that above on them, that they are yung pino-force sila to do something that they don't want to do. They have a leader, or rather than they have more powerful people in their society that sila yung nasusunod. They parang pinapamahalaan nila yung society nila because dahil sa kanilang kapangyarihan. Gaya nga nasabi ko, conflict. So there is powerful and yung mga mahihina. So that is coercion. They are forcing people within their territory to do something that are against the personal interest of one person. That is why in the face of these stresses, so problem. So next is, we go back to the consensus theory. So consensus is a concept of society in which the absence of conflict is seen as the equilibrium state of society. So in consensus society, the people there is well-mannered, and they have, like what I said earlier, that they have values and norms that are following. So I conclude that those belong in the consensus society, they are good people. They are very well-mannered people, to the point that in something that is vice versa. If they are bad, if they are bad, excuse me, sorry, if consensus jury is good people, so in conflict jury is hindi not totally that they are bad, but there is some point that there is something in their society that they cannot understand also. There is a conflict, kumbaga. So, yun nga, absence of conflict. So, dito nga, the conflict here, the conflict in consensus society is cannot be seen. They are all equal. Walang mataas, walang mababa. All of them are equal. So, in conflict theory, according to Horton and Hunt, focuses on the heterogeneous nature of society and the differential distribution of political and social power. So, according to Horton and Hunt, this conflict theory is all about focuses in heterogeneous nature. So meaning heterogeneous is there is a differences or diversity to one another. So yan na nga yung nakikita. So yan na nga sinasabi na and the different distribution of political and social power. So kung sino yung mayaman, sila yung mas may kapangyarihan. Kung sino yung mas mahirap, syempre wala sila magagawa. Kumbaga, they are just the slave of the rich people. So, yun. So, next slide, please. So, another one, let's go to consensus theory again. Sociological perspective or collection of theories in which social order and stability, social regulation form the base of emphasis. So, in consensus theory, they are following social order and social regulation for them to have a peaceful society. So, yun nga. And then, they emphasize this because this social order and social regulation will hold the society together. Without conflict, without any discrimination will happen within the group. So let's go to the conflict theory. So this theory asks how schools contribute to the unequal distribution of people into jobs so that more powerful members of society maintain the best position and the less powerful groups, often women, racial, and ethnic groups. So gaya ng sinabi ko kanina, the more you are powerful, the more you have more connection, and the more you are rich, you have a power to discriminate or dominate those people that lower than you. Gaya na. So, ang mga vulnerable dyan is the women. First, of course, women because we are women, but now, of course, we are now different because we can do many tasks also like men can do. So, and next is also the vulnerable one dyan is racial and ethnic groups because they are different in ethnicity. So next in conflict theory is conflict perspective assumes that social behavior is best understood in terms of conflict or tension between competing groups. So meaning, they assume that they can best understand, they will understand more the social behavior in terms of conflict or tension or competing to other people. But it's not such a manner that they are doing bad things. Because in this concept, they will not hurt each other like physical. They will have something tension that, for example, when you are debating, each groups will rebut and they will say their opinion, their knowledge about the topic itself. So in that case, in that debate situation, there is a possibility that tension will arise in that activity which is the debate. So in that manner, the way they compete, of course, they will understand their social behavior. What is the meaning of social behavior itself through that kind of activity? So many activities can be We can give many activities, but of course, there is so much. So, yun na muna. So, next. So, consensus theory and conflict theory. So, consensus and conflict sociological theories are reflected in the works of certain dominant social theories, such as these are the proponents who made a research in the consensus and conflict theory, which is first then is the Karl Marx, Emil Durkheim, and Max Weber, and other proponents such social theorists such as Paul Carson and Robert Merton, Louis Althusser, and Ralph Dahrendorf, and Herbert Blumer. So that is. So here we will focus on the study which is the famous in the consensus theory and conflict theory, which is Karl Marx. In his work, Karl Marx in his early years was interpreted by some social theorists as emphasizing the role of human beings in social conflict. So in the study of Karl Marx, he focused on the conflict theory na kung ano yung nagagawa niya within our society in terms of education. Thus, they argue that Marx's theory was a theory characterized by class conflicts or the conflict between the bourgeois or rich owners and the proletariat or poor workers. So yun yung didebatehan nila sa work ni Karl Marx. Although they have different, although Marx give his study or theories about the conflict theory, of course there is always someone who will oppose what you have already studied, because they will conduct again and again another study to prove if your study is valid or reliable. So next slide please. So let's proceed to the conflict model. So the conflict model is concerned with the stresses and conflict that emerge in society because of competition over scarce resources. It focuses on the inequalities that are built into social structures rather than on those that emerge because of personal characteristics. So dito, society because competition over scarce resources. When we say scarce resources, that are the resources that are limited. They have, meron silang hangganan. Because nowadays, we are using so much of those scarce resources. Kahit na hindi naman natin kailangan, inaaksaya pa rin natin. We are not hindi ko naman nilalahat, but some people, they are just wasting it. So it focuses on the inequality. So conflict theory, like what I said earlier, that it focuses on the inequalities or the differences of one another in the society. So yun, built into rather than on those emerge because of personal characteristics. So nagfo-focus talaga sila kung ano yung iba sa'yo na iba rin sa kanila. Rather than in your personal characteristic itself. Ayun na. The next that is the meaning of conflict model. Next, let's proceed to the social structures produce patterns of inequality in the distribution of scarce resources. So, social structures. So, produce patterns, inequality in the distribution. So, social structures these are the, like families, association, business, religious, and many other institutions that are part in social structures produce patterns, because in them we can easily define what are the things, what resources we should be given to them Especially when, of course, when you are rich. Of course, kasi we are in the conflict theory. So when you are rich, when you are rich people, of course, the more resources you will have because of your money, because of your power to have that resources. While in the lower class, of course, they have limited resources they will get because nga dun sa tinatawag natin, because there is inequality. There is possibility there that pinapaboran lang nila kung sino yung mas nakakataas. In terms of distribution of the scarce resources. So next is scarce resources, conflict. So yun na nga, distribution pa lang ng scarce resource ng mga resources is nagkakaroon na agad ng conflict. And then, conflict down to reorganization and change. So reorganization or reorganize, syempre, you will organize again, and then there is a big possibility and tendency that what you organize or reorganize in your society, there will be a possible big impact to have a change. Next, please. So, next, consensus and conflict. Sociological theories are reflected in the works of certain dominant social theories and other prominent social theories. So here, I already discussed it, but let's have who are the one who study the conflict and consensus theory. And here, si Karl Marx is the one who studied first the conflict theory, which is followed by Talcott Parson, Robert Merton, and Herbert Mead. And then, sa kabila naman, si Max Weber, he studied also the conflict consensus theory, which is, sabi dito, schools teach and maintain particular status culture, a group of people in society with similar interests and position in the status hierarchy. So si Max Weber is one of the proponent and famous proponent of consensus theory, which is nga, yung sinabi niya na even though they are different, they have a similar interest and position in the status of hierarchy. Walang nakakataas, walang nakakababa. They are all equal, like what I said. So next is after Max Weber is Ralph Dahrendorf, which is he also studied the consensus theory. So ito namang mga tao, these people are the one who both study consensus and conflict theory, which is si Emil Durkheim, Louis Althusser, and Herbert Blumer. So thank you. So next reporter is Dewey Magno, which is he will report the structural functionalism. So Dewey Magno, please.
So, good afternoon again, sir, and to our classmates. So, now I'm going to report the structural functionalism. So, structural functionalism states that society is made up of various institutions that work together in cooperation. So, in deeper explanation of the structural functionalism, it is a sociological theory that explains why society functions the way it does by emphasizing the relationship between the various social institutions that make up society, which is the government, law, education, religion, and the like. And for functionalism, meaning sees society as a system, a set of interconnected parts which together form a whole. There is a relationship between all these parts and agents of socialization to the maintenance of society as a whole. So, next slide please. So, here are the Parsons' famous AGIL or EGIL, which stands for Adaptation, Goal Attainment, Integration, and Latency. So, first, let me all know who is Parson. So, Talcott Parson was an American sociologist of the classical tradition, best known for his social action theory and instructional functionalism. So, the first one one is adaptation, which means a system must cope with external situational exigencies, which means urgent or demand. It must adapt its environment to its needs. So in deeper explanation of this adaptation, so it is refers to the relationship between the system and its environment. In order to survive, social system must have some degree of control over their environment. So next is goal attainment. A system must define and achieve its primary goals. So goal attainment, which refers to the need for all societies to set goals towards which social activity is directed. Procedures for establishing goals are institutionalized in the form of political system. So one of the best things to meet the standards needs of society is the help of the government, which is not only set goals but also allocate resources to achieve their goals. So next is integration. A system must regulate the interrelationship of its component parts. It must also manage the relationship among the other three functional imperatives, which is AGL, or the adaptation, goal attainment, and the latency. So in integration, it refers to the primary adjustments of conflicts. So it is concerned with the coordination and mutual system adjustment of the parts of the social system. So legal norms define and standards relations between individuals and between institutions, and so reduce the potential for conflict. So when conflict in this stage is arise, it is settled by the judicial system and does not therefore lead to the disintegration of the social system. So in this part, it is all about avoiding conflicts or problems. So next is latency, which is a system must furnish, maintain, and renew both the motivation of individuals and the cultural pattern that create and sustain the motivation. Or in simplest words, it refers to the maintenance of the basic pattern of the values institutionalized in the society. Institutions that perform this function include the family, the educational system, and the religion. So next slide, please. So next is cultural system, social system, action system, and personality system. And these are the structure of the general action system. So first, cultural system performs the latency function by providing actors with the norms and values that motivate them for action. So cultural system, as cultural values and norms put into actors, it shapes them. It can dictate the ego, which considered as our wants and alter ego of a person, and also affect the role of actors with the norms and values that motivate them for action. So in this cultural system, it includes our norms and values which affect individuals to motivate to do a certain action. So as we can all know from the earlier discussion, so norms means these are the rules and guidelines, while values are the values of a person which we value and considered as important to our lives. So next one is social system, copes with the integration function by controlling its component parts. So social system consists of individual actors interacting together in which they are motivated to the optimization of gratification. So in this social system, it is all about the interaction of each individual for the optimization of gratification or for the betterment of the whole society. So next is action system, behavioral organism that handles the adaptation function by adjusting to and transforming the external world. So action system, for further explanation, this refers to a system state with an explicit description of how and when state-modifying events may occur. Action system describes both the succession of events in a system and the way in which system state changes. So in this action system, so it is more focusing on the transformation of the external world or the so-called changes. So next is personality system. So it refers to the performs the goal attainment function by defining system goals and mobilizing resources to attain them. So the person performs the goal to attain, but the person must first know the defined goals by the system to achieve the goal of the system. So in this, person must first define the goal before attaining the real goal of the system. So next slide please. So next is Parsons' answer in instructional functionalism with the following set of assumptions. So the following are only assumptions of Talcott Parsons, which means it is accepted but without the truth or are not yet proven. So these are following. So we have 7. So first, systems have the property of order and independence of parts. So second is systems tend toward self-maintaining order or equilibrium. Third, the system may be static or involved in an ordered process of change. Fourth, the nature of one part of the system has an impact on the form that the other parts can take. Fifth, systems maintain boundaries with their environment. 7. Allocation and integration are two fundamental processes necessary for a given state of equilibrium of a system. And lastly, systems tend towards self-maintenance involving the maintenance of the relationships of parts to the whole, control the environmental variations, and control of tendencies to change the systems from within. So next slide please. So now Parsons described a social system as something which consists of a plurality of individual actors interacting with each other in a situation which has at least a physical or environmental aspects, actors who are motivated in terms of a tendency to the optimization of gratification and whose relation to their situation. So for simplest explanation of this statement, it is all about Parsons described the social system by an interacting of the individual to each other and also their relationship to their environment for the optimization of gratification or the optimization of the betterment of our society. So next is social system. Social system begins at the micro level with interaction between the ego and alter ego, defined as the most elementary form of the social system. So, what is ego? So, ego, which means personal wants and self-pleasure, while alter ego is also your wants but not your pleasure or not your not only for yourself but for others' pleasure. So, alter ego is another version of oneself or our second identity. So, next, please, next slide. So, functional requisites of a social system. So, requisites, which means an essential or necessary or a beneficial base of a social system. So number 1, social system must be structured so that they operate compatibly with other system. So social system must be well structured to be well compatible to other system. Then next is number 2, to survive, the social system must have the requisite from other system. So the social system needs other to survive. So we're all familiar that no man is an island, so that we need each other for us to survive. So next, so number 3, the system must meet a significant proportion of the needs of its actors. So social system must meet the needs of its actors to motivate them and make them progress. So number 4, the system must elicit adequate participation from its members. So the system and its members should have a good participation to each other for them to have their progress, or for them to for the system to be well managed. So number 5, it must have at least a minimum of control over potentially disruptive behavior. So social system must be well managed or controlled by the acting leaders to avoid conflicts. So in the system, it is important that there was a so-called leader for them to control and avoid conflicts or problems, or which is the disruptive behavior. So number 6, if conflict becomes sufficiently disruptive, it must be controlled. So there's always a way to solve any problems and conflict immediately. So by controlling conflicts or problems, a system will survive or will grow. Next is, finally, a social system requires a language in order to survive. So, because language is the fundamental use in communication, we use this to interact, to share our thoughts and knowledge for us to survive. So it is important that language that we use in our everyday life, so that, or in order for us to survive in this society. So all of these are the functional recipients of social system by Talcott Parsons. So that's all, and thank you. So next reporter will be Mary Joy Bautista, and she will going to report the key principles of functionalist theory.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, classmates. I am going to report the key principle of the functionalist theory. First, the interdependency. Interdependency, one of the most important principles of functionalist theory, is that society is made up of interdependent parts. Meaning, interdependency is they are dependent upon one another, which means a person needs other, or they have a personal relationship. And dito na papasok yung quotes na no man is an island. Meaning, we need others in order to survive. And example of interdependency is that the class requires a faculty member to teach a subject and the students learn it. Meaning, students need a teacher to learn, because you cannot learn without the presence of the teacher or your instructor. Second, functions of social structure and culture. Closely related to interdependency is the idea that each part of the social system exists because it serves some function. This principle is applied by functionalists to both social structure and culture. Social structure refers to the organization of society, including its institutions, its social positions, and its distribution of resources. Culture refers to a set of beliefs, language, rules, values, and knowledge held in common by members of a society. Meaning, it refers to a society's framework consisting of the various relationships between people and groups, the direct and set limits on human behavior, and also social structure guide people's behavior. Example for this is the families. Families is one of the component of social structures, wherein the family begin the growing population and socialization, because They inculcate the values and norms that are needed for them to survive. Next slide, please. Third, consensus and cooperation. Another key principle in the functional theory is that societies have a tendency toward consensus. Consensus meaning is pinagkasunduan. And for example for this is we all believe in the principles of democracy and freedom. Societies tend toward consensus in order to achieve cooperation. And it means that a cooperative process in which all group members develop and agree to support a decision in the best interest of the whole. And consensus, the input of every participant is carefully considered and there is a good faith effort to address all legitimate concerns. Fourth, equilibrium. A final principle of functionalist theories is that of equilibrium, meaning equal or balance. Equilibrium is characteristic of a society when it has achieved the form that is best adapted to its situation. And equilibrium, this view holds that once a society has achieved the form that is best adapted to its situation, it has reached a state of balance or equilibrium. It will remain in that condition until it is forced to change by some new. Next slide. These are the structural functional model. First, stability, order, and harmony. It is important because in order for the betterment of the society, and social structures provide present patterns which evolve to meet human needs. Meaning, they are distributed to different groups to determine easily their needs. Example for this is the family. And maintenance of society, meaning to maintain good condition in the society. And the structural functional model addresses the question of social organization and how it is maintained. The component part of a social structure. The families, neighbors, associations, schools, churches, banks, countries. All these components is part of a social structure which all are about groups in the society which we can interact and live together. Social structure is often treated together with the concept of social change, which deals with the forces that change the social structure and the organization of the society.
So, good afternoon again, sir, classmates. So, I am here to report the interactionist theorist. So, when we say interactionist theorist, it means that it talks about the interactions of the people. So, next slide, please. So, interactionist theorists attempt to make the commonplace strange by turning on their heads every day, taking for granted behaviors and interactions between students and teachers. Example, the process by which students are labeled gifted or learning disabled are from an interactionist point of view. So, the example here given by the interactionist theorists is the teachers and the student. which says that the process by which students are being labeled to be a gifted or learning disabled. So in that point, the interaction is considered formulating now. So let us proceed for more. Next slide, please. So these are the basic forms of interaction. We have two. The non-symbolic interaction, which does not involve thinking, and second is the symbolic interaction, which require mental processes. So as you can see, it is the opposite of the two social interactions. So next is, so let us first define what is symbolic interactionism. Views the self as socially constructed in relation to social forces and social structures. So meaning, it is the way we learn to interpret and give meaning to the world through our interactions with others. The focus of the interaction theory is the communication and the relationship that exists among and between groups in education, peers, teachers, students, and etc. So, next slide please. So, here are the principles of symbolic interactionism. First, human beings, unlike lower animals, are endowed with a capacity for thought. When you say endowed, it means the ability. So, the statement says is correct because we humans have irrational thinking, while the animals doesn't have a rational thinking. So second is the capacity for thought is shaped by social interaction. So for simplest meaning of it, social interaction with others, it helps us to perceive good thoughts, which is true. For example, we are interacting with our friends, and then the topic is for good thoughts, which is we adopt considerately. So we formulated now good thoughts. So next is number 3. In social interaction, people learn the meanings and the symbol that allow them to exercise their distinctive human capacity for thought. So let us say, for instance, there is a warning sign in that particular area. So therefore, the people will see that warning sign is formulating thoughts to avoid that particular place for his or her safeness. So next is number 4. Meanings and symbols allow people to carry on distinctively human action and interaction. So 5. Or number 4 rather, for examples, there is a sign put by the owner of a business. It says there that the sign says for hire, which means they need applicants for their business. So now the people who see the sign has its intention to apply for the job. So in the formulation of our thoughts, of course, the interaction will form there. So that's it. The formulating of interactions of the business owner and the applicants. So next is number 5. People are able to modify or alter meanings and symbols that they use in action and interaction on the basis of their interpretation of the situation. So meaning, the way they understand meaning and symbols, the way they think on things are being modified because the meanings and symbols that will help them to have their good interpretation regarding on the situation. So for example, your formulating thoughts on that particular situation is some sort of lack of knowledge. because you are doing or you are already planning to do the negative ways that can harm you. But because of the guidelines that formulated by the public place, you will now have an idea or thoughts that the things must be done in this way. So that's it. Next is number 6. People are able to make these modifications and alterations because in part of their ability to interact with themselves, which allows them to examine possible courses of action, assess their relative advantages and disadvantages, and then choose one. So number 6 rather, because we human are rational, we have the ability to interact with others and assess our action if it is good or bad, and then we choose the best one. So, as what I say, we humans have irrational thinking so that we have formulated our thoughts into a good actions, like we choose what is good. Okay, so next is number 7, the intertwined patterns of action and interaction make up groups and societies. So number 7, it says that it talks about the unity of all in making groups and good society. So the key concept here is the unity. So that's all. Next slide, please. Next slide is all about interactionist, theorist, non-symbolic interactionism. The first non-symbolic interaction means conversation of gesture does not involve thinking. The second symbolic interaction does require mental processes. So please, next slide. So for better understanding about the symbolic and the non-symbolic, when we say symbolic structuralism, it talks about the mental thinking. While for the non-symbolic instructionism, it talks about the absence of mental thinking is always there. So here are the men's approach to symbolic interaction rested on 3 basic premises. The first is the people act toward the things they encounter on the basis of what those things mean to them. So, the simplest meaning of this is, if what people believe, what they think, without thinking the right or wrong decisions or actions. So, in simple way, or in simple explanation, this is a people who are always believing on themselves to be truth. Instead of knowing the good or bad consequences of their actions. So next is number 2. Second, we learn what things are by observing how other people respond to them. That is through social interaction. So meaning, we learn through our observation to our environment or to the people surround us, which is truly because we learn to our environment in many aspects. We learn how to manage ourselves, how to assess everything in this community, how to help others, and many more. So next is 3. Number 3. Third, as a result of ongoing interaction, the sound, gestures, facial expressions, and body posture we use in dealing with others acquired symbolic meanings. The meaning of symbolic gesture extends beyond the act itself. A handshake, for instance, is a symbolic gesture of greeting among Filipinos. So, in the simplest way, you interact with people through your actions and behavior. Just for examples, the shake hands is considered as the hand gestures, diba? So, this is one of the most popular or the common things that we use in interacting to other people's for knowing each other. So, next slide please. We have here the three types of objects differentiated by Bloomer. So first, let us know first Bloomer. Who is Bloomer? Herbert George Bloomer is an American sociologist whose main scholarly interests were symbolic interactions and methods of social research. Yan. So, si Bloomer ay Bloomer is an American sociologist who is responsible for symbolic interactionism. So, Bloomer, three types of objects differentiated. So, here are the three. The physical objects, which is the example is the table, something that physical objects is referring here. So, next is social objects, which refers to the students, teachers, and etc. So next is the abstract objects. These are the ideas that we are formulating or consider as our thoughts. Next slide, please. Another important concept that has been used by symbolic interactionists is the looking glass self. This concept was developed by early symbolic interactionist theorist Charles Horton Collie. The basic notion of the looking glass self can be summed up as, next slide please. We see ourselves as others see us. So for better understanding of that quote, school played a significant role in educating the Filipino citizens. It is our duty as teachers to really inculcate the value of fairness and honesty to our students. We also need to teach them how to learn so they may be able to adapt in any situations, events that they will be presented. The looking glass self simply tells us that we must be cautious in giving remarks to others. Let us all be generous in giving positive comments and lessening the words that will hurt others. To end our topic, I just wanted to give you one lesson, guys. In Tagalog, wag mong gawin sa kapwa mo ang ayaw mong gawin sa'yo. So let us spread love, not war. Thank you.
To summarize our topic, those theories has implication to our education wherein it explained the educational system that we have. At the same time, we discussed that education takes place in society because education is the one that holds the future of our society and as well as we people. This topic emphasizes the education in society for better understanding that education is the main role and function of society itself. Without the people in the society, education will not take place. After all, no man is an island. We need each other for us to function, to survive, and live in this beautiful world.
So, hope you learned something from our discussion. I'm Cherry Ann.
I'm Juvie.
I am Benjamin.
I'm Mary Joy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.